Well, hi there. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope wherever you are, life is treating you well. Now, I wouldn't want to presume to tell you, or anybody else for that matter, how to live your life, how to plan for the future, but what I do know from my day-to-day work, helping people manage themselves out of a sticky financial situation, I do know that a lot of people do not plan fully. Now, I'm as guilty of it as the next guy, frankly. I will look at the general figures and things usually work out, but if the debacle that's going on in the USA with the Trump regime sending ICE to raid businesses, hard-working people, and just rip people out of their situation, leaving all their financial burdens just hanging. If that has shown us anything, it's that we don't plan properly for the worst. I mean, properly the worst. Because you might be able to plan for your own early demise or whenever. You might be able to plan so the taxman doesn't take all the money you're going to try and pass on to your kids. But how do you plan for a situation like being ripped out of your business, being ripped out of your personal responsibilities and sent off to a concentration camp to be, forced to work the land for free? How do you cope with that? How do you plan for that? Well, you might say that you can't, but I think... And you might say that, it doesn't affect me, I don't live there, okay, but maybe you should be planning all the same. Now, my day-to-day work, as I say, it's helping people manage themselves out of financial sticky situations. And part of what we do when we do this is we sit down with somebody and we say, well, look, what are all the main bills, the core bills that you have to pay, and what do they cost? And then we'll look at things that are somewhat optional, the entertainment bills, which are a flexible thing. Even if you're tied into a contract, some things can go. Some things can go unpaid. There are less polite ways of putting it, but you get what I mean. And then, of course, there are things you still have to pay, but they're also negotiable, like the cost of food. You just got to shop around for the best bargains. Now, most of the successful people will know to the penny how much money they've got available at any point. They'll have a good idea, and some of the people who really struggle don't. And this is a difference. Honestly, this is a difference between someone who's getting by very well and someone who's not. I'm as guilty of it as the next guy. I will know roughly what I've got available to spend, but some of those figures I'll be a bit sketchy on, and it concerns me. It bothers me. Because I don't like gaps in information. I don't like the notion that something could happen. I wouldn't have the flex in my finances to deal with it. For example, if you suddenly need a new part on your car, if you've got a car, then you've got to be able to budget several £100s to come up with all of a sudden. Otherwise, you risk losing that completely. And it's amazing. Because I talk to so many people, it's amazing when we run through the figures. A lot of people will know, and they'll say, yes, I run a car because I've got to get to work and back and do other things and this and that and the other. So it's essentially, it's essential. I've been lucky in that I've been able to take my car off the road. In the past, when I was younger, I'd have a car, but I didn't necessarily need to use it. I would sometimes cycle and take that thing off the road completely and not suffer the expense for so many months. That would allow me to have the car for the summer when I can make use of it, go to the seaside and things like that. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people say, no, I need it all the time. Okay, but they don't budget for the problems. They don't budget for the tyres. They don't budget for the engine repairs. They don't budget any further than here's the cost of fuel, here's the cost of tax, here's the cost of insurance, and that's it, which is kind of concerning. And they'll go, oh, no, we'll fine, we'll just get by. I know there's a few lights on the dashboard, but we'll get by. Okay. Now, that might work in some countries, but not here in the UK. We have a standards agency that goes out in force once in a while with the local police. And so I was coming home from work and I saw a bunch of police sitting alongside of the road. I thought, that's strange to see police sitting there. And they're waiting in ambush for people passing by in cars that looked like they were maybe in need of repair. And they were taking people off to a local car park where they were having their cars inspected and, as it would appear, seized. for, failing to be taxed, failing to be repaired in good repair. And that sent me home thinking, oh, goodness gracious. Had a look at the car, and other things that would cause me a problem had I accidentally driven past that lot. And, it's things like misty headlights, missing light bulbs, dodgy exhaust, any number of things. And I realise it's time to get on with the car repairs. Now I can do it. I have the technical expertise to do these things and repair on a budget, but a lot of people don't, and a lot of people don't budget for any of that, whether they're repairing themselves or whether they're getting parts and repairs done by a dealership. And it's frightening that there's so many of us out there that don't plan to that level, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And just going back to the issues we're seeing in the States at the moment with the ICE raids and people being ripped out of their personal lives, their businesses and so on. Now, when you lose a core member of the family, when someone is suddenly ripped away, what happens to all the people, all the responsibilities, all the bills they leave behind? What does that do to all the businesses that they used to work with and pay? Oh, this is how we know it's a regime in charge of the USA. But now, there's not easily any way to plan financially for this, but it might be best to have people you trust that you could say, look, should the worst come to the worst, can you help me with this? And worth giving some thought to it. And the only thing I can think to say is, if you know your neighbours have been ripped away by ICE unfairly, without proof, without good cause, and they've got pets and children, I would say you need to try and find it in your heart to look after those responsibilities and be there for those that are left behind. Now, you might say, well, Matt, I don't run a car, so when it comes to budgets, I pretty much know where all my bills are, and I'm going to be okay. Okay. You might think so, but another thing people don't budget for is illness. We don't want to think about it because a lot of us are lucky enough to go through life without illness until something nasty, boom, we're gone. Fine. But it is worth thinking about what you might do. Have illness cover if you can afford it, or put some plan in place to deal with things if the worst should happen. One of my wife used to work for a company over in the USA, and her manager, unfortunately, suffered a heart attack, and at that point she ended up obviously off work in hospital recovering from it. And because she was off work for long enough, not very long, they sacked her. And she lost her income, and she lost, of course, her insurance, and then she had medical bills to deal with, and then she eventually lost her house and ended up on the street, all because she'd suffered a heart attack. A symptom of what it's like in the States, a symptom of how close we all skate to being on the street or worse. And it's why in civilised countries, it's why we have a free at the point of use health system, because you can't have a system that just dumps people the minute they suffer a little bit of illness that should be recoverable. With the level of technology we have as a people, as a species, a lot of major illnesses should be recoverable. We should be able to go back to work and continue paying. It makes no sense to have a system that just dumps you at the first sign of trouble, and then all the things you were paying, all the debts you had, just go to the wall. And who pays? All the other customers pay, don't they? It's not ideal, it's not profitable, it's not common sense, it's not good business. Anyway, people don't plan for illness, and you need to plan. You need to plan for dentistry, you need to plan for major illness, minor illness, you need to plan for these things. The system we have in the UK isn't perfect, which is why you might wait on waiting lists for a long time. That's why we have dentists that don't always meet expectations. I have a good dentist at the moment. I'm very, very grateful for that. But we need to plan more. How you do that, I don't know. But it's worth shopping around whilst you've got the mental fortitude to do so, just in case, just to have a few plans laid down so it's a quick go-to if things should become problematic. And the third thing I'd like to talk about today is the cost of clothes. It's amazing how many people talk about their regular food budget happily, but then they talk about cost of clothing and they say, well, no, I just buy as things wear out. Okay, but surely you know how much you're going to spend. And they go, oh no, not really. I might go a year and not buy clothes. And there might be people out there like that. But there's a point you've got to maintain. A lot of businesses still require staff to be presentable up to a certain standard. And unless those businesses are prepared to subsidise staff clothing, it comes from wages, it comes from the individual who works in the business. So you've got to plan for this, but a lot of people don't know what it's going to cost them. And it's a big cost. You've got to sit down and do me one favour, do it for yourself, okay? When you finish watching this video, when you've liked and subscribed and shared to someone who might need it, have a look at your own finances, have a look at your regular bills, have a look at the cost of your food. It's instructive. And then have a look at the cost of clothes to you. And tell me, do you consider that? Is that part of your budget? Or is that something that you just deal with as and when? Is it a sundry to you? Now, if it's a minimal cost to you, fine, okay. But to a lot of families, it's not. Cost of sending kids to school in uniform, major cost. Cost of getting kids new clothes, because they always seem to want to take us to the cleaners for the cost of new children's clothes. If you're running a family, these are things that cannot be ignored. They cannot be trivialised. And a lot of people still do it though, don't they? Yeah. So 3 points for the day. So anyway, thank you for listening to my rant today. I do appreciate your time. Like I say, whatever you do, have a safe day. Hope to see you soon. Bye for now.